Me 28, deep into a mechanical engineering PhD at a university that loves reminding everyone how prestigious it is. Day-to-day reality is less future scientist and more lab assistant plus underpaid instructor. Most of my time goes towards supporting the department's star professor, Tomas. He's cut from an older generation, believes results are the only currency that matters, demanding but consistent, and honestly the backbone of why the program carries so much weight nationally. My routine is pretty standard for grad school life. Experiments, lectures, and a constant rotation of caffeine, a lot of late nights, questionable meals, and the endless research treadmill. Then the university decided to shake things up. The old dean of engineering retired. A nice guy, mostly just signed papers and went to fundraisers. The university's board, in its infinite wisdom, decided we needed a fresh perspective. They hired Dean Eleanor. We all got the email. An introduction, a picture. She looked exactly how you'd expect. Severe haircut, power suit, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her bio was full of buzzwords: synergy, paradigm shift, disruptive innovation, and, of course, equity. My first thought was, oh boy, here we go. Professor Thomas just sighed when I showed him the email. He'd seen this movie before. The first all-hands faculty meeting was a few weeks later. Attendance mandatory. The big auditorium was packed. Professors, lecturers, department heads, even us lowly TAs had to stand in the back. Dean Eleanor walks on stage. The energy in the room is weird, a mix of polite curiosity and deep, deep skepticism. She starts her speech. Thanks everyone for the warm welcome. Standard stuff. Then she gets to the meat of it. She talks about the stagnation of the engineering field, how it's been a boys' club for too long. She pulls up a slide with a pie chart, shows the gender ratio in our department, something like 70 to 30, male to female. She calls this a moral and intellectual failure. A few people in the front, mostly from the softer sciences who crash the meeting, start nodding enthusiastically. Most of the engineering profs just look tired. She announces her flagship initiative, the Equity Pathway Admissions Program. The room gets very quiet. The gist of it was a complete overhaul of how we select students. Test scores and GPA would no longer be the primary factors. They were now just one part of a holistic review. The new focus would be on lived experience, overcoming systemic barriers, and ensuring the incoming class reflects a 50-50 gender split. She literally said the goal was a perfectly balanced class within 2 years, no matter what. I look over at Professor Thomas. His jaw is clenched. He's gripping his pen so hard his knuckles are white. When she finishes, she asks for questions. A long, awkward silence. Nobody wants to be the first to step on the landmine. Then Professor Thomas stands up. He doesn't use the microphone. His voice just carries. Decades of lecturing in huge halls. He starts by welcoming her. Very polite, very professional. Then he asks the question. He outlines that our program's strength comes from its rigorous, merit-based admissions. We take the best, regardless of their background. He points out that we already have a higher percentage of female students than many other top programs. He asks how lowering standards to meet an arbitrary quota will do anything but damage the university's reputation and devalue the degrees of all students, including the women who got in on their own merit. It was a masterclass in professional takedowns, calm, logical, backed by facts. Dean Eleanor's smile becomes a thin line. She thanks him for his traditionalist viewpoint, says that his definition of merit is outdated and biased. She starts talking about how test scores are a tool of the patriarchy and don't reflect true potential. The argument went back and forth for a few minutes, Thomas using logic, Eleanor using jargon and veiled insults. She finally cuts him off by saying the decision has been made and she expects the full cooperation of the faculty in building a more inclusive future. The spineless university rector, who was sitting in the front row, immediately stood up and started a round of applause. MFW half the room claps while the other half looks like they're calculating the trajectory of a falling satellite. The meeting ends. The message is clear. Get on board or get out of the way. A few months pass. Admission season kicks into high gear. As a TA for Thomas, I get to see some of the applicant files he reviews. He's on the admissions committee, or at least he was. One day he calls me into his office. He looks more defeated than I've ever seen him. He slides a folder across his desk. "Look at this," he says. The name on the folder is Dustin. I open it. Holy cow. The kid is a unicorn. Perfect SAT scores. Straight A's in the hardest AP classes. Won the state physics competition 3 years in a row. Built a functioning drone with a custom guidance system in his garage. For fun. His letters of recommendation read like he's the second coming of Nikola Tesla. His personal essay was about his dream of coming to our university, just like his dad did. It was his only goal. Thomas tells me, this is the kind of student this university was built for, a natural engineer. He says he's been championing this kid's application. Fast forward a few weeks. The committee is meeting. Thomas later told me what happened. The new process is a joke. Dean Eleanor has 2 of her own people in the room, non-engineers who have final say. They go through the applicants. When Dustin's file comes up, Thomas gives his glowing recommendation. One of Eleanor's new people, a woman with a degree in sociology, looks at the file. She says his scores are impressive, but asks, what obstacles has he overcome? Thomas is floored. He says the kid comes from a normal middle-class family. He didn't have to overcome some grand tragedy. He just worked his ass off. The sociology person says that his profile shows significant privilege, and that admitting him would only perpetuate the existing power structures. They put his file in the maybe pile. Thomas fought for him, but he was outvoted. The accepted pile, meanwhile, was filling up with female applicants with significantly lower scores. One of them, I later found out, was a girl named Miranda. I saw her file by accident. It was left on a table. She was a good student, don't get me wrong. B+ average, decent test scores, active in clubs. But her stats weren't even in the same universe as Dustin's, not even the same galaxy. Her essay was all about the challenges she faced as a woman in STEM and her desire to fight toxic masculinity in the tech world. It was like it was written specifically to tick every box for the new admissions criteria. The decision letters go out. Dustin gets a thin envelope. Rejection. Miranda gets the big fancy acceptance package. Thomas was livid. He tried to appeal to the rector. The rector gave him some corporate speech about supporting the dean's vision and the importance of progress. Basically told him to sit down and shut up. The story gets worse. Our biggest rival, a state university that we always look down on, has a very clever dean. This guy isn't an ideologue. He's an opportunist. He hears whispers about what's happening at our university. He reportedly tells his admissions team to create a special watch list for our high-stat male rejects. About a week after Dustin gets his rejection letter, he gets a personal package in the mail. It's from the rival university's dean of engineering. Inside is a letter. It doesn't just offer him admission, it offers him a full 4-year scholarship. The Distinguished Future Innovator Scholarship, they called it. The letter praises his achievements, mentions his drone project by name, and says he's exactly the kind of student they want to build their program around. They weren't just accepting him. They were rolling out the red carpet. What do you think he did? He accepted it before the ink was dry. And he wasn't the only one. Dozens of top-tier male applicants who we rejected got similar offers. Our rival was basically getting our entire A-team for free. The new semester starts, the campus is buzzing. Dean Eleanor is on the cover of the university magazine, talking about the most diverse and equitable class in history. I'm a TA for one of the foundational physics courses for first-year engineers. Usually, this class is a pressure cooker, fast-paced, challenging. We weed out the kids who can't cut it. This year, it's different. On the first day, I look out at the lecture hall. It's almost exactly 50-50, men and women. Mission accomplished, I guess. But then the class actually starts. The first few weeks are a disaster. We're covering basic vector mechanics, stuff these kids should have seen in high school. I'm getting flooded with questions. Not smart questions, questions like, what's a derivative again? Or, can you explain what torque is one more time? I have to hold extra office hours, and they're packed. The students who are struggling are overwhelmingly the new equity pathway admits. They're not bad kids, they're just out of their depth. They were set up to fail. Meanwhile, the handful of guys who got in on pure merit, the Dustins who slipped through the cracks, are bored out of their minds. They sit in the back, finish the problem sets in 10 minutes, and then just scroll on their phones for the rest of the class. There's no challenge for them. The motivation level in the room is just dead. One of the students in my section is Miranda. She's one of the smarter ones from the new cohort. She's keeping up, but just barely. She's always in the front row, taking furious notes. She clearly wants to succeed. A few weeks into the semester, she comes to my office hours. She's frustrated. She complains that the professor is going too slow, that he spends half the lecture re-explaining things a 5-year-old could understand. She says she came here for a challenge, to be pushed, but she feels like she's in a remedial class. I just nod and listen. What am I supposed to say? Yeah, that's because half the class cheated their way in, including you. I just told her that sometimes foundational courses have to cater to different learning paces. She didn't look satisfied with that answer. She also made a comment about the guys in the back of the class. She said they were disengaged and had a bad attitude, and that it was probably some kind of toxic masculinity thing, because they couldn't handle a female-led environment. I just stared at her. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. She thinks they're the problem. She has no idea they're bored to tears because the curriculum has been dumbed down to accommodate her. The midterm exams happen. It's a bloodbath. The average score is a 48%. In previous years, the average was usually in the low 80s. Professor Thomas and the other senior faculty are in panic mode. If they fail half the first-year class, it'll be a disaster for the department's funding and Eleanor's grand experiment. So, they do the only thing they can. They curve the grades. A massive, ridiculous curve. A 48% becomes a C+. A 65% becomes an A. They effectively just passed everyone, regardless of whether they learned anything. The message it sends is terrible. Competence doesn't matter. Effort doesn't matter. As long as you show up, you'll be pushed through the system. The good students are pissed. Their A's now mean nothing. The bad students are just relieved. They learned nothing, but they passed. The whole academic integrity of the department is shot. Things get even worse around the time of the annual career fair. This is a huge event for us. All the big tech and engineering firms send recruiters. Lockheed, Boeing, Google, you name it. It's where our students get prestigious internships that lead to 6-figure jobs. I'm helping Professor Thomas run the department's booth. The recruiters, guys who have been coming here for years, start stopping by. At first, it's the usual friendly chat. Then they start talking about the interviews they've been conducting with our students. Their faces are concerned. One recruiter from a major aerospace company pulls Thomas aside. I'm close enough to overhear. He says, "Tom, what the hell is going on here? I just interviewed 5 of your sophomores for a competitive internship. None of them could answer basic questions about thermodynamics. One of them couldn't even tell me the difference between stress and strain." Thomas just looks grim. He says we're going through a transitional period. The recruiter just shakes his head. "We usually hire a dozen interns from your program. This year, I don't think I can even recommend one." That conversation happened over and over all day. Different companies, same story. The quality of the students was noticeably, shockingly lower than in previous years. The word was out. Our university was no longer a reliable source of top-tier talent. By the end of the day, the vibe at the career fair was awful. The recruiters were packing up early. The students looked dejected. The biggest blow came at the end of the year. Every year, there's a national collegiate robotics competition. It's a huge deal in the engineering world. Our university has a legendary team. We've won the championship 5 of the last 10 years. This year, our team gets steamrolled in the early rounds. They looked unprepared, and their machine was plagued with design flaws. And who wins the national championship? The team from the state university. Our rival. The camera pans across the winning team as they hold up the trophy, and right in the center, holding the trophy with a massive grin on his face, is the team captain, Dustin, the kid we rejected. The story is all over the engineering blogs. State U's underdog victory, a new powerhouse in collegiate robotics. They interview Dustin. He's humble. He thanks his team. He talks about the amazing opportunities he's had at his new university. He never mentions us. He doesn't have to. Everyone in the know knew exactly what happened. We handed our biggest rival our best talent on a silver platter, all in the name of equity. After that public humiliation, Professor Thomas decides he's had enough. He spends weeks compiling data: midterm averages, final exam scores, student retention rates, internship placement numbers, feedback from corporate partners. He puts it all into a comprehensive, damning report. The numbers are undeniable. Every single metric of academic performance and student success has plummeted since the equity pathway was implemented. He requests a meeting with Dean Eleanor. He's going to present her with the cold, hard facts. He hopes that seeing the data in black and white will force her to reconsider. I help him prepare the slides. The data is even worse than I thought. We're not just declining. We're in a free fall. He goes to the meeting. I wait in his office, nervous for him. He comes back an hour later. He looks pale. I ask him how it went. He just slumps into his chair and puts his head in his hands. He told me she didn't even look at the data. She refused to engage with his points. When he showed her the falling test scores, she said the tests were biased. When he showed her the negative feedback from recruiters, she said the companies were sexist. When he brought up Dustin and the robotics competition, she accused Thomas of being obsessed with one privileged male student. Then, she turned it on him. She accused him of being the problem. She said his old-fashioned teaching methods and unwelcoming attitude were the real reason students were struggling. She claimed he was actively trying to sabotage her initiative because he couldn't handle a woman in a position of power. The meeting ended with her informing him that he was being removed as head of the curriculum committee, effective immediately. She was replacing him with one of her sociology people. He wasn't just ignored, he was punished for telling the truth. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about education anymore. It wasn't about helping anyone. It was about ideology, and nothing was going to get in its way. Not facts, not logic, and certainly not the future of the students. The first year was over, and the real damage hadn't even begun. The second year started, and the vibe on campus had changed. The optimism was gone, replaced by a kind of cynical resignation. The remaining good students, the ones who didn't transfer out, had adopted a new strategy: do the bare minimum to pass and focus on personal projects and networking outside the university. They knew their degree was being devalued in real time. Their only hope was to build a portfolio that could speak for itself. The department became a ghost town after 5 p.m. The study groups, the late-night lab sessions, the collaborative energy that used to define the place, it was all gone. My role as a TA became less about teaching and more about hand-holding. The curriculum had been officially simplified. We were told to make our courses more accessible. That was the new buzzword. It meant easier tests, fewer assignments, and a lot more group work. Oh, the group projects. That was Eleanor's new big push. The idea was that collaborative projects would foster an inclusive environment and allow students with diverse skill sets to contribute. In reality, it was a way to hide the incompetence of half the class. I got a front row seat to this disaster in the sophomore level Intro to Circuit Design course I was TAing. The final project was to design and build a simple functioning AM radio, a classic project. Hard enough to be a challenge, but totally doable. The students were put into randomly assigned groups of 4. I saw Miranda's group assignment. She was put with 3 other Equity Pathway students, 2 girls and a guy who had all barely scraped by in their first year. I almost felt bad for her. A week later, she's in my office. She looks exhausted. She tells me the project is a nightmare. One of her group members, she said, had no idea how to read a schematic. Another one couldn't solder to save her life and kept burning components. The third member just didn't show up to their meetings at all. Miranda had designed the entire circuit by herself. She had sourced all the parts. She was trying to assemble it alone. She asked me if she could just do the project by herself and get a grade based on her own work. I had to tell her no. Dean Eleanor's new policy was that all group members received the same grade, no exceptions. It was about collective success. Miranda looked like she was about to cry. She said, "So I have to do 100% of the work and they get the same A that I do?" I just nodded. Them's the rules. She left my office looking completely defeated. The following week, I saw her talking to one of the new female professors Eleanor had hired, a woman who was a big proponent of the new regime. I was walking by the professor's office and the door was open. I couldn't help but overhear. Miranda was explaining her situation, how her group was holding her back, how it wasn't fair. The professor listened, then gave her this condescending smile. She told Miranda that this was a valuable learning experience, that as a woman in STEM, she had a responsibility to lift up her fellow sisters who didn't have her advantages. She said Miranda's focus on individual achievement was a product of the patriarchal competitive mindset they were trying to dismantle. She told her to be a better team player and to stop thinking selfishly. Miranda just stood there, speechless. She had walked in looking for an ally, and instead she got a lecture on her own internalized sexism. That was the turning point for her. I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized the ideology she had championed was now being used against her. The system wasn't there to support her. It was there to use her competence to prop up the incompetence of others. The rest of the semester, she was different, quiet, focused. She did the work, dragged her group across the finish line, and never complained again. She just watched, and she took notes. Meanwhile, the consequences for the university were getting bigger and harder to ignore. The career fair that year was even worse than the last. Half the big companies didn't even bother to show up. The ones that did sent junior HR reps, not senior engineers. It was a clear sign they weren't serious about recruiting from us anymore. We lost a major research grant from a big aerospace firm. They had funded a multi-million-dollar lab on campus for over a decade. They pulled their funding, citing concerns about the long-term viability of the graduate talent pipeline, a polite way of saying our students were now useless to them. Professor Thomas and the other tenured faculty were trying to fight a losing battle. They were being buried in paperwork for new diversity and inclusion initiatives, mandatory workshops on unconscious bias, rewriting course descriptions to include social justice outcomes. It was death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. They were so busy with this nonsense, they barely had time to do actual research. The best professors started to leave. A few retired early. Others took jobs at rival universities, including the state university where Dustin was thriving. They were hemorrhaging talent at every level. The reputation of the university was crumbling online. You'd see threads on engineering forums asking, "What happened to this school?" Alumni were furious. They saw the value of their own degrees diminishing. The university's online donation portal was getting flooded with angry comments instead of money. Through all of this, Dean Eleanor was untouchable. She was a media darling. She was getting invited to speak at conferences about her revolutionary approach to education. In her little bubble, surrounded by her yes men and celebrated by people who knew nothing about engineering, she was a massive success. She saw the falling metrics not as a failure, but as proof that she was successfully disrupting a broken system. She genuinely believed her own hype. Then came the day the new national university rankings were released. This was the day of reckoning. Rankings are the one thing the university administration truly cares about. It affects alumni donations, federal funding, everything. We all knew it was going to be bad. We didn't know how bad. The website usually updates at noon. By 11:59 a.m., every professor and student in the department was hitting refresh on their browser. The page loads. A collective gasp goes through the entire engineering building. It's a bloodbath. Our overall university ranking had dropped a few spots. Not great, but not a total catastrophe. But the engineering program rankings, we had plummeted. We went from a perennial top 10 program to number 47. 47th. We weren't just knocked down a peg. We were kicked into the abyss. We were now ranked lower than our rival state university for the first time in history. They had climbed into the top 20. The news spread like a wildfire. The silence in the hallways was deafening. It was the silence of pure, unadulterated shock. This wasn't an internal report that Eleanor could dismiss. This wasn't anecdotal feedback she could ignore. This was a public, nationally recognized verdict on her tenure, an F grade for the entire world to see. The rector's office must have gone into meltdown. I heard from a friend who works in administration that the board of trustees was calling emergency meetings. The biggest donors were calling the rector's personal cell phone and screaming at him. The public relations nightmare had begun. The student newspaper, which had been a cheerleader for Eleanor's policies, was suddenly silent. They didn't know what to say. But someone else did. 2 days after the rankings dropped, a new article appeared on the student newspaper's website. It was written by Miranda. The headline was explosive. I was an equity admit. They used my success to justify a failure. It was brutal. She didn't use jargon or emotional arguments. She used facts. She wrote about her own experience, about coming to the university full of hope, believing in the mission of equity. Then she detailed the reality. The dumbed-down classes. The professors forced to teach to the lowest common denominator. The nightmare of group projects where she had to carry the dead weight of unprepared students. The feeling of being condescended to by faculty who told her that her own ambition was a form of internalized oppression. She wrote, "I was supposed to be the poster child for this new system. Instead, I've been given a second-rate education at a first-rate price. My degree is now worth less than the paper it's printed on." The most damning part was the end. She said the equity pathway wasn't about helping women. It was about an administrator's ego. She said it was an insult to every woman who had earned her place through hard work and merit. It was a perfectly crafted attack. Because it came from her, one of the people the system was designed to benefit, it was impossible to dismiss as sexist or reactionary. The article went nuclear. It was picked up by national news websites, tech blogs, education journals. Our university's failure was now a national case study. That was the final nail in the coffin. The rector had no choice. The financial and reputational damage was irreversible. The pressure was immense. He called Dean Eleanor into his office. No one was there, but the story that circulated was that it was short and brutal. He didn't debate her. He didn't discuss ideology. He put a stack of papers on the desk in front of her. The rankings report, a printout of Miranda's article, a list of donors who had officially pulled their multi-million-dollar pledges. He told her she had become a liability the university could no longer afford. He gave her two options: resign immediately and quietly, or be fired by the board of trustees in a very public, very messy way. She tried to argue. She started talking about the patriarchy and fighting the good fight. He just cut her off. "This is over, Eleanor." An hour later, a campus-wide email went out. "Dean Eleanor will be stepping down to pursue new opportunities. We thank her for her service and wish her the best in her future endeavors." Just like that, she was gone. No farewell party, no grand speech. She just vanished. A year has passed since then. Professor Thomas was made the interim dean. He's trying to right the ship. He immediately scrapped the equity pathway and restored merit-based admissions. But the damage is done. Our rankings only went up to 42nd this year. The climb back to the top 10 will take a decade, if it ever happens. We're still struggling to attract top-tier students, both male and female. The smart ones don't want to come to a fixer-upper. I finally finished my PhD. Professor Thomas wrote me a great letter of recommendation, but I still had trouble finding a good academic position. Our university's name is just toxic right now. I ended up taking a research job in the private sector. It's a good job, but it wasn't the path I wanted. Sometimes I browse the tech news just to see what's going on. Just last week I saw a headline on a major tech site. Apex Robotics, AI startup founded by State University alums, acquired by Google in landmark $300 million deal. I clicked on the article. There was a picture of the two co-founders shaking hands with some Google VP. One of the co-founders was Dustin. The article called him one of the brightest young minds in robotics. I just stared at the screen for a long time. We had him, he was ours, and we threw him away for nothing. He won, merit won. It just didn't win at our university. Later that day, out of morbid curiosity, I looked up Eleanor on LinkedIn. Her new job title is Independent DEI Strategy Consultant. Her profile picture is the same professional headshot, the same smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Her latest post was a link to a webinar she was hosting. Confronting Systemic Bias in the Modern Workplace. 7 people had liked it. I closed the browser. Some people never learn, and the rest of us just have to live with the consequences.